The Appalachian mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, shrouded in early autumn mist. A group of 4 friends, Emma, Jake, Ryan and Lila, unloaded their gear at the edge of a remote trail deep in the Blue Ridge, their laughter cutting through the crisp air. "This place is incredible," Lila said, taking in the dense forest. "It's like stepping back in time." Jake grinned. "Told you it'd be worth the drive. No cell service, no traffic, just us and nature." Emma adjusted her pack, her expression thoughtful. "It's beautiful, but there's something, I don't know, heavy about it." "You and your vibes," Ryan teased. "Relax, we're here to camp, not commune with the forest spirits." Emma smiled, but her unease lingered as they began their hike. The air seemed heavier with every step, and the towering trees whispered softly as the wind moved through their branches. By late afternoon, the group reached a small clearing near a creek, where they set up their tents. The setting sun painted the trees in shades of gold and crimson, and the crackling of their campfire filled the air. As they shared stories and toasted marshmallows, the forest seemed to close in, the fading light casting long, flickering shadows. "What's the deal with this place, anyway?" Jake asked, poking the fire with a stick. "There's always some creepy legend with spots like this." Lila shrugged. "I heard the Cherokee used to live around here, lots of old burial grounds and sacred sites. That's probably why it feels so different." "Yeah," Ryan said with a grin. "Different, like spooky." "Don't joke about that," Emma said sharply, surprising them. "It's disrespectful." Jake raised an eyebrow. All right. Didn't mean anything by it." The mood shifted, their conversation quieter as the night deepened. The forest, now bathed in moonlight, seemed alive with faint movements and distant whispers. The first sign something was wrong came just before midnight. Lila, stepping out of her tent to use the bathroom, let out a startled cry. The others scrambled out to find her staring at the edge of the clearing. "What is it?" Emma asked, her flashlight sweeping the trees. I thought I saw someone," Lila stammered. "Over there, just beyond the trees." Ryan laughed nervously. "It's probably just your imagination." "Or a deer," Jake added. "We're in the woods, remember?" But Emma stepped closer, her brow furrowed. "She's right. Someone's been here." She pointed to the ground where faint footprints led away from the camp. They were old but distinct, as if made by someone walking barefoot. The next day, things began to disappear. Jake's flashlight, Ryan's compass, and one of Lila's boots vanished without explanation. They searched the clearing and surrounding forest but found nothing. By afternoon, the whispers had begun. At first, they were faint, barely audible, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, they grew louder. The voices were guttural and low, weaving together in a language none of them understood. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore," Ryan said, pacing near the fire. "Someone's messing with us." "Who would be out here?" Emma asked, her voice tense. "We're miles from anyone." "Guys," Lila said, her voice trembling. She pointed to a patch of earth at the edge of the clearing, where strange symbols had been etched into the dirt overnight. This wasn't here before. Emma knelt to examine the markings, her chest tightening. "These aren't random. They're ceremonial." Jake frowned. "What kind of ceremony?" Emma hesitated. "A warning." That night, the shadowy figures appeared. They lingered at the edges of the firelight, humanoid but twisted, their shapes shifting as they moved. One by one, the friends disappeared. Lila went first, drawn into the trees by the sound of a familiar voice calling her name. Jake vanished next, his flashlight abandoned in the dirt. Ryan lasted until dawn, but when Emma awoke, she found his tent empty, his belongings untouched. Alone and desperate, Emma wandered deeper into the woods, following the whispers. They led her to a clearing unlike any she'd seen before. Ancient stones marked a burial ground, the earth heavy with a sacred energy that made her knees weak. At the center of the clearing stood a figure, tall, gaunt, and shrouded in tattered clothes. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and his face was lined with anguish. "The hermit," Emma whispered, realizing she was standing before the spirit of a man bound to this place. The hermit's voice echoed through the clearing. "You shouldn't have come here." Emma swallowed hard. "We didn't know. Please, let my friends go." "They are lost," the hermit said. "Just as I was. I disturbed the sacred ground, and now I guard it. You will join them unless you make it right." Remembering her grandmother's stories of their Cherokee heritage, Emma knelt before the stones and began a prayer. She spoke in the fragmented phrases she had been taught as a child, asking for forgiveness, for balance, for peace. The whispers swelled around her, a cacophony that threatened to drown her out. But she kept speaking. The wind howled and the ground trembled. The hermit's form began to flicker, his anguish softening as the burden lifted from him. He nodded once, a silent gesture of thanks, before fading into the ether. The forest grew silent, the air lighter. The stones seemed to glow faintly, as if acknowledging her efforts. Emma felt the presence of her friends, their spirits now at peace, watching over her. She emerged from the woods days later, disoriented and exhausted. The search parties that found her said she was rambling about spirits and burial grounds. When she told them the truth, they labelled her unstable and placed her in care. Years later, Emma sat in her room at a mental health facility, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. She could still feel the forest's presence, a reminder of the price paid for trespassing on sacred ground. And at night, she could hear the whispers, gentler now, but always there, calling her back to the place where the spirit of the hermit no longer walked, but where her friends' voices lingered in the wind. Emma's life in the mental health facility became a blur of sterile walls, quiet murmurs, and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. The staff treated her kindly but warily, their pity thinly veiled behind clinical detachment. She rarely spoke about what had happened in the forest. The few times she tried, the reactions ranged from gentle nods to silent judgment. Over time, she learned to keep the truth to herself. But the truth wouldn't leave her alone. Every night, as darkness fell over the mountains visible from her window, the whispers returned. At first they were faint, a subtle hum, like wind brushing through the trees. But as the hours passed, they grew louder, distinct and suffocating. The voices of her friends called to her, just as they had in the woods. "Emma, why didn't you help us?" Lila's voice was soft but filled with sorrow. "Why did you leave me?" Ryan's whisper was sharp, tinged with betrayal. "It's your fault." Jake's voice hissed, cold and accusatory. She would lie awake, clutching the thin blanket, her body trembling as the whispers grew into a chorus. Shadows flickered in the corners of her room, shifting and writhing like living things. The face of the hermit appeared in the reflection of her window, his expression no longer pained but watchful, as if he were waiting for something. Emma began to avoid sleep altogether, fearing the spirits that haunted her dreams. The doctors called it paranoia, prescribing medications that dulled her senses but never silenced the whispers. Her days were spent in a haze, the world around her muted and distant, while the spirits became her constant companions. One night, unable to endure the torment, Emma decided to confront them. She sat cross-legged on the cold floor of her room, closing her eyes and whispering the same prayer she had spoken in the forest. The Cherokee words felt foreign on her tongue, broken and incomplete, but she poured her heart into them, begging for understanding. The room grew colder, the air heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. The shadows coalesced into faint, flickering forms: Lila, Ryan, Jake, and the hermit. They stood silently, their faces a mixture of sorrow and anger. "I tried," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to disturb the ground. I didn't know." "You knew enough to feel it," Jake said, his voice cutting. "You felt it and ignored it." "It wasn't just you," Lila added, her tone softer but no less haunting. "We all ignored it. We all paid the price." The hermit stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You set me free, but the balance remains broken. You carry the weight now." Emma's chest tightened as she realized the truth. By freeing the hermit, she had taken his place in the spiritual cycle. She was the one tied to the sacred ground now, cursed to carry the spirits of those who trespassed and to guard the place they had desecrated. The facility staff noticed the change in her. Emma spoke less, her gaze often fixed on something they couldn't see. She stopped participating in group activities, withdrawing further into herself. They marked her condition as deteriorating, unable to understand the forces at work. Emma began to feel the pull of the mountains, the whispers growing louder whenever she looked out her window. She dreamed of the burial ground almost every night, the stones glowing faintly under the moonlight, the forest alive with unseen power. The spirits of her friends lingered at the edges of her mind, their voices a constant reminder of what had been lost. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant peaks, Emma felt a shift in the air. The shadows in her room grew darker, the whispers more insistent. She rose from her bed and walked to the window, her reflection distorted, the face of the hermit flickering over her own. The pull was undeniable now. Without alerting the staff, Emma left the facility that night, walking barefoot through the forested trails until she reached the place she had once vowed never to return to. The burial ground was just as she remembered it, its sacred stones glowing faintly in the moonlight. She knelt before the stones, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't understand." The forest seemed to breathe, the air alive with an ancient energy. The spirits of